Everyone, welcome to this week's episode of No Such Thing as a Fish. Andrew Hunter Murray is off on his hollybobs, sailing the seven seas, looking for new, unbeknownst species of moss. And while he is away, we have got a guest for you, and that guest is none other than Anne Miller. Of course you know Anne, she's one of the QIL, she's a really good friend of ours, and it's great to have her back. One thing you really need to know about Anne, especially in these weeks upcoming to Christmas, is that she is also a published author. She has written a series of children's books. They are known as Mickey and the Animal Spies. They're known as that because that is their name, and they're absolutely brilliant. My daughter absolutely loves looking at the pictures, and I'm sure when she gets to the right age, she will enjoy reading them as well. While we're on the subject of books, of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention our book, mine and Anna's new book, Everything to Play For, the QI Book of Sport. Definitely buy that for your loved ones for Christmas. Anyone who likes sport, definitely buy it for them. If you don't like sport, but you like what we do, I promise you'll love this book because it's full of loads of interesting human stories, drama. It's the ultimate sports book for people who don't really like sports, and also people who do like sports will like it as well. It's for everyone. That's the great thing about our book. But then that also has to be true of Andy and Dan's books. You definitely should go and get those as well. Dan's book is called The Theory of Everything Else. It's a brilliant look into his brain, his unique brain, let's say, but he's looked at the history of people who had done otherwise great things, but deep down they had a dark secret of believing some weird shit. And speaking of weird shit, you should also have a look at Andy's books. Andrew Hunter Murray, he has two books. They're called The Sanctuary and The Last Day. They're both brilliant, acerbic, dystopian books that tell you something about the modern day while thrilling you with an incredible story about the future. They're absolutely amazing. You've got to get those as well. Basically, what I'm saying is, who doesn't love a book for Christmas? And there's a ton of them made by your favourite QI elves. They're all available online, and mine, Anna's, Dan's and Andy's you can find at nosuchthingasafish.com/books. One more very, very important thing I need to say before I leave you in peace to listen to the podcast is that we do have a couple of live shows coming up just before Christmas. They will take place in London on Thursday the 7th and Friday the 8th of December at the Soho Theatre. Now, we've already mentioned this to the Clubfish members, and I think it's been on social media, so the truth is there are not many tickets left. If you do want to come and see this show, literally pause now and go to nosuchthingasafish.com/live, click on the link and check if there are any tickets left. You never know, sometimes extra tickets do come up closer to the date, so do go and check there anyway, and hopefully see some of you there for our Christmas shows. Anyway, thank you so much for getting to the end of this without fast forwarding. If you have fast forwarded and got to here without hearing the last bit, shame on you. But anyway, it's time for our podcast with Anne Miller, so there is nothing more to say apart from on with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of No Such Thing as a Fish, a weekly podcast coming to you from the QI offices in Holborn. My name is Dan Schreiber. I am sitting here with Anna Tashinsky, James Harkin, and Anne Miller, and once again we have gathered around the microphones with our 4 favorite facts from the last 7 days, and in no particular order, here we go. Starting with fact number 1, and that is Anna.
My fact this week is that a list of adorable things written over 1,000 years ago includes chicks who look like their clothes are too big for them and faces drawn on melons.
Okay, can I ask for definitions of chicks and melons? Because I live in the 1990s.
Right. Both chicks and melons mean what they've meant in every decade outside of the 1990s.
Right.
I'm afraid baby chickens and fruit.
James just frantically destroying all his notes.
Wow, people are writing about adorable things 1,000 years ago. That's weird.
This was, I actually heard this reference on Radio 4 this week, so I'm sure there are people who also heard it mentioned. It's the Pillow Book, which is this extraordinary book written by a woman in Japan in the 10th century under the Heian period. And
Hi, Anne.
Hi.
that's why we chose this. God, it took me a long time to find a High Anne period fact. Anyway, this this woman basically wrote a diary of just random stuff that popped into her head of lists and observations and things she thought should happen and shouldn't happen and things people should wear and shouldn't wear. And one of them was, here's a list of really cute things. And one of them was faces drawn on melons. One of them was chicks who look like their clothes are too big, which I think is like if you see a chick but its feathers look like they're a bit swollen.
Oh,
you know, they look.
I
Their
thought they
feathers
meant
look
like you dress them up in human clothes.
That's what I thought.
'Cause that's cute.
that would be even cuter. From what I could tell from interpretations of it, I think they're just talking about chicks who look like they don't fit into their clothes yet. 'Cause
Right.
They're too small.
But
But
I would argue that's slightly less cute than like a hat and dungarees.
Yeah,
well, take it up
agreed.
with Say Shonigan, the author of this book. Maybe she hadn't thought of that. The good thing about this book is, and I'm sure you all found this reading it, it's just like someone is writing today, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just like lists of cute things. So one is a young palace page. Obviously, that's not the thing anymore, but a young palace page who is still quite small and walks by in ceremonial costume. And that's just like, you know, if you go to a wedding and you see a little,
Yeah,
you know,
a page
toddler, a page boy in a suit.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
But it's not all happy stuff, is it? Like, there's so many great pissed off lists. Things like things that are unpleasant to hear. Someone who has an ugly voice yet speaks and laughs without restraint. So she has a list for that. She has a
Wow.
list for things that give a pathetic impression. The voice of someone who blows his nose while he is speaking. The impression of a woman plucking her eyebrows. It's all so odd.
My favourite random one in there is the list of extremely frightening things. Do you guys know this?
Yes, yeah.
No, I didn't see that.
Thunder. Yeah, fair enough. And then I just enjoy this one. Extremely frightening thing. When a thief has entered the house next door, one is extremely frightened. If he breaks into the house where one is actually living, can't say it. If he breaks into the house where one is actually living, one loses consciousness and knows nothing more, which is true.
That's true. So I think some of these, they sound like stand-up routines.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, I found one which is things that are infuriating, which sounds like it's like a Josh Widdicombe routine.
Yeah.
Says, this is what's infuriating. Someone suddenly falls ill and an exorcist is sent for. They don't find him in the usual place and a tedious amount of time is spent waiting while they go around in search of him. Finally, they manage to locate him, and with great relief you see him to performing the exorcism rites. However, the recent exertions of exorcising some other possessing spirit seem to have worn him out, for no sooner does he sit down and start in on the chanting than his spirit seems to have worn him out, his voice goes drowsy, and that is utterly infuriating.
I think.
So relatable, isn't it?
Yeah,
so good.
my note for Josh, maybe broaden it a tiny bit.
I like the idea this is the hey, what about airplane food of like 1,000 years
It
ago.
really is. Like, there's a list. Rare things. A silver tweezer that is good at plucking out the hair.
It's
This
annoying.
is today.
It is,
You
yeah.
can't get tweezers that pluck out hairs well. How have they not designed this in the last 1,000 years? It's basically shots miscellany, isn't it? Because it is lists,
Yeah.
but it's also essays sometimes or
Diaries.
diary entries, observations.
So this is just to put it into the period. I know everyone probably knows the years of the High An period, but
Do you refresh my memory?
we're talking the year 1000 is what's going on here. And at the time that she was writing this book, Beowulf was being written also, just to put in context the other great pieces
Not
of literature.
nearly as relatable, Beowulf.
No, that's true. I haven't actually read it, so
Well, the first word in it, we still don't know what it means.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you say the word? Do you know it? Or
It's like what? Or-
Right.
Yeah, there's arguments about what it means.
Yeah. And she was working in the court of the Empress at the time. She was like a lady in waiting who was always there. And she basically wrote this book because she just had a lot of spare time with nothing to do.
Yeah.
So she never intended it for publication. It was just a personal book that she was writing. We don't even properly know her name. So she's called Say Shonigan. But that's Shonigan is the title that you're given. It's a minor counselor, and Say is the name that was added later, which refers to her father's name, so you can distinguish her from the other Shonigans who were in part of the court.
So do we think it could be Josh Widdicombe gone back in time to the Heian period?
It's
maybe?
possible. Say Shonigan does sound like a Japanese version of Josh Widdicombe.
Yeah.
Yes.
The word Heian means peace in Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was quite a long period, and it was a time where there wasn't much war going on, so people had time to write these stand-up routines.
That's why she was so bored. I reckon she craved a war. Do we think she was a bit of a a bit of a bitch.
Was she?
What?
Well, I mean, just from what she writes.
Who likes adorable things?
Give us some examples. I mean, no.
Depends which list you're reading.
Yeah, you're right. I think she had mean qualities. In fact, there was a story about her where one of her neighbours' houses burned down and they lost everything they owned.
Like the fire in the house next door is the most scary.
Thank God it wasn't in her house.
Well, I don't know how scary she was finding it, because basically she wrote a kind of little note mocking this person.
Right.
He's lost everything. He's standing outside his house, naked, and gives it to her mum and says, hey, go give this note taking the piss out of this guy to him.
Okay. She had what was effectively a lot of people claim was a rival. I don't think we fully know that, but it is someone who is friend of the podcast, Murasaki Shikibu, who wrote... and we mentioned in episode 63 of Fish, The Tale of Genji.
Yeah.
The first ever novel, which finished mid-sentence, right? Like it just cuts off. What happened is that Sei Shonagon was working for this empress, and at the time it was one emperor, one empress. That's how it worked. But they bucked the trend with this one, and suddenly she was no longer the exclusive empress. So he got married again, and the lady in waiting who became the lady in waiting for the next lady was this person, The Tale of Genji.
No way.
Yeah, so that's why
Really?
they were kind of like in rival land, according to certain historians.
So that book, The Tale of Genji by Murasaki, has a word kawaiushi, which is the word which turned into the modern day word kawaii, which means cute in Japanese. And this idea of, lots of cute animals and, Hello Kitty and all that kind of stuff, this is kind of a 20th century thing that we're not sure exactly. There's lots of reasons why it might have come about, but possibly a reaction to the war, to the bombs, stuff like that. People wanted to go from the horrors of war to cuteness, but definitely seems to have become popular when mechanical pencils came out. So, those pencils that kind of... you twist them and the lead comes out.
Twist them? Do you not click them?
There's
Or the
two
ones
options.
the one where you take the little one out and put it in the top. Do you remember them from primary school?
There's so many different
No.
ways.
They were
Hang on, you had to... There was a little pocket
No,
containing
they were,
leads.
inside where the lead would go, they were like tiny little things, and you'd pop one at the bottom and pop it in the top to save you sharpening your pencil.
Yeah.
I hated them all because they write so horribly. So
Well,
I guess
they
I
were
haven't
very
experienced
popular
them.
in 1970s Japan, where you would not have fit in.
No.
Because they could write very, very thin lines, and it inspired a kind of writing among teenage girls where they would put like lots of little hearts and little, characters and stuff in their writing, and it was so popular, and it made their writing so difficult to read that it was banned in loads of schools.
Right.
Basically,
Really?
you weren't allowed to write in this kawaii style. But by
Wow.
then, the trend had already taken a hold.
I guess once you've started doing it, it sort of becomes your hand. Like there were some people who would do like proper circles over their eye or like little hearts.
Yes,
And I'm always like, why? It takes so much longer.
I was just going to ask, Anne, were you a hearts above the eye kind of person?
I barely dot my eyes.
Your eyes are just a line. You don't have time for that dot. But it's not. I was reading a sort of paper on it saying it's not as cutesy as maybe our version of cute. Like it's got a bit of an edge.
Okay.
So
Like kawaii cute.
the kawaii cute, the Japanese cute, which you can kind of see. There's sometimes a bit of a dark edginess to it. There's a character called Gloomy the Naughty Grizzly, who
Okay.
I hadn't come across, but apparently it's a big cultural phenomenon. And he's a 2 meter tall, like cuddly bear, but he's very violent. He's covered in blood quite a lot of the time. He attacks his owner quite a lot. And that's kawaii in
Interesting.
Japan, but not necessarily something we would say was cute.
I think that's like chemo kawaii, so it's like grotesque and cute at the same time. I think that's what they call it. And obviously they have loads of mascots, don't they, in Japan?
Yeah.
In 2015, the governor of Osaka complained that he couldn't recognise most of his prefecture's mascots. They had 92 of them.
Wow.
In Osaka alone. And he ordered a cull, and 20 of his
cull?
characters were...
Oh, wow.
Murdered by the grizzly bear.
Public executions, I hope.
Jackie made a list like 20 mascots that really annoy me, and then
I think yeah.
It's amazing amazing how successful it was, though. You know how when governments try to be cool, like David Cameron saying he supports Aston Villa or whatever, and it's just massive cringe. But the Japanese government, basically in the 90s, did like Cool Japan, which was a bit like we had Cool Britannia here.
Yeah.
And Cool Japan was the idea of exporting all this Japanese cultural stuff. And I don't know how they did it, but they nailed it because it's so popular now, isn't it? You get people who are really into manga, really into those styles.
Hello Kitty is a global phenomenon.
Hello Kitty.
But like in the Cool Britannia was like Blair versus Oasis, and do you think in Japan now kids are listening to What's the Story, Morning Glory?
Yeah. Oh,
it's still
definitely.
Blur and Oasis there. Yeah. It's not resolved. Yeah.
Hang on, but are Blur and Oasis popular there?
I think
'Cause
not
you started
now.
by saying that.
Not anymore.
Damn, it would be great if they were, because that would be my cultural homeland. That's when I stopped learning about pop music, was in about 1998.
Yeah, wouldn't it
Yeah.
be great if there was like a little museum somewhere where you could go and they're still listening to all your kind of... It's
Blur,
called Smooth FM.
Oasis. Oh, God. Cuteness is a funny thing, isn't it? And we are the cutest of the primates. So that's nice.
Official.
For us.
We self-proclaimed cutest.
Official. I guess it is self-proclaimed because we're the only ones that can write about it.
Were any of the bonobos allowed to vote in this?
Screw you, gorillas. You can't read. You can't define what's cute. So what's kind of defined as cute is the traits that are common in infants. And that is, it was actually defined by this guy called Konrad Lorenz, who won a Nobel Prize. It's called the Kinderschema. And it's a large brain capsule, as he puts it. Big forehead, I think we'll call it. Large and low-lying eyes, bulging cheeks, short and thick extremities, a springy, elastic consistency, and clumsy movements, which is like the ugliest way to describe what is actually a really cute
Adorable,
image.
Oh, wasn't there was a thing I read a while ago about animals who found us cute, like an elephant like caressing people, and like they think like, oh, you're just so cute and small. It was really lovely.
I don't know if I want to be caressed by an elephant, of all the animals that could caress me.
It may not. I think it was an elephant. I feel like it was a trunk involved.
That sounds likely. They're quite empathetic elephants, aren't they?
One of the scariest things is an elephant caressing next door's baby. It's absolutely terrifying. There was a study done in 2009, and they gave people a load of cute images, and then they asked them to play the game Operation. So where you have like a plastic body and you have to pull out the funny bone and stuff so that it doesn't buzz. Well, it turned out that anyone who'd been exposed to high cuteness stimuli was better at Operation. So first of all, a tip for Christmas: if you go home and someone's got Operation, have a quick look at some kawaii stuff before you play, and it'll
good
help.
tip.
Yeah.
But secondly, it's due to extreme carefulness, and the idea is you've seen lots of cute things, you want to look after them almost, and you want to be more careful.
Right. But don't look at the bloodied bear, because that might give you the impression that blood all over your Operation human is going to be
Adorable.
adorable.
I like that you had like 4D Operation as a kid, Dan. That had real blood.
You guys didn't use real blood? Oh my god.
Stop the podcast!
Stop the podcast.
Hi everyone, we'd like to let you know that this week we are sponsored by ExpressVPN.
That's right. So this Christmas season, are you planning on going online and looking up all the Christmas presents that you want to buy for your friends and family, whilst maybe using one of your friends and family's Wi-Fi? If you are, you've got a problem, because a really nosy family member who's in charge of the Wi-Fi would be able to see your browsing history, know the websites you've been to, and know what you're getting them for Christmas, and plenty more.
Plenty more?
They'll see plenty more.
No, not me. I only use my internet exclusively for buying Christmas presents. But luckily, no one can see what I buy and what websites I've been on, because, of course, I always use ExpressVPN on my phone, on my computer. It allows me to encrypt my online traffic much better, for instance, than, let's say, incognito mode, which doesn't really do that.
No, indeed. Incognito mode essentially just hides your history from yourself. So if you don't trust yourself, it's fine. This issue happens wherever you are. So if you're on holiday, if you're at work, if you're in a cafe, there's someone who's in charge of the Wi-Fi who would be able to have access to your browsing history. I mean, the reason I use a VPN is basically because you don't know what's going to happen to all that data that's being collected about your browsing if you don't. So if you go to expressvpn.com/Finnegan, Fish right now. You can get 3 extra months for free when you sign up.
That's right. So go to ExpressVPN, that's expressvpn.com/fish. And as a special holiday offer, you will get 3 extra months for free.
Okay, on with the show.
On with the podcast.
Okay, it is time for fact number 2, and that is Anne.
My fact is that the viperfish has teeth that are so long it can't close its mouth properly or it would impale its own brain.
I bet there are a few that have, though.
Yeah, do you think?
Yeah, the idiot kids. Yeah.
The Darwin Award viperfish.
Exactly.
But so have they sort of evolved like the equivalent of a door stopper?
They have. So basically, they're very long and silver, and they've got these lighty up spots along their along the bottom of their stomach, and then they have these huge teeth that kind of pierce upwards from their jaw. And luckily, it doesn't impede their hunting, because to hunt, it basically just swims around with its mouth open until it finds prey.
Right.
It can unhinge its jaw and rotate its skull, so when it finds prey, it just basically swims straight at it, and then it clamps its teeth shut like a cage and holds them in its mouth and then eats them.
It can close its mouth, so
But the teeth are coming out, so it's not like making a seal. So it's kind of like having a very extreme overbite, but
Yeah,
the other
because
way.
I know there's another fish called the common fangtooth, which, as its name might suggest, has fangy teeth. And what they have is they have special sockets on either side of their brain, so that when they close their mouth, their teeth go into those sockets.
Well, that
Isn't
is
that
smart.
amazing? Yeah.
It's so precise with the pockets. I think, like, if you got punched in the jaw and that was slightly dislocated, the first time you tried to shut your mouth, it would then miss the holes and pierce you in the brain.
That would be. That's why there's no boxing in the fangtooth
And
community.
I think that's correct, yeah.
But viperfish is really cool. So as well as being able to get its prey in this cage, it can expand its stomach, so it can swallow prey that's 50% bigger than itself,
Oh, wow.
which is
That's
so cool.
amazing.
So I just think whenever you say, I could eat my own body size of this, like,
Yeah.
well, he can.
Very unsubtle though if you're invited to a dinner party, and sometimes you have a meal before you go and you just fake it and just say no, I'm starving. You're actually really full. Can't hide that. You've got 50% more body weight coming
Hello.
through the door. Goldfish
Oh, yeah.
have teeth.
Right.
Can't believe it.
How do you think they eat?
I just thought they swallowed things that didn't need chewing.
Well, they eat like little fishy flakes. They're not.
Yeah,
they kind
I
of
thought
just
it was
dissolve in the
like
water.
kind of like if you open their mouth, you can't see it, but the teeth are at the back of the throat. They just have a set of teeth that do all the old
that's
crunching. Yeah, right at the
That is-
back.
Yeah, that'll often happen. And I always think, how does that, do you sort of contract your throat as a fish? Because lots of fish have it, don't they? This teeth in the throat thing.
Yeah.
Seems like it would be very uncomfortable.
But what's really cool is if you have goldfish at home right now, go and have a look in your little aquarium that you have. Look at the bottom, because what they'll do is they often lose teeth and they grow new ones. And so either you can catch your goldfish in the act of literally spitting its tooth out, or look at the bottom, there'll be little teeth.
You should say how often they do, because I worry that someone's going to sit in front of their goldfish tank staring at it for days on end,
Every
waiting.
7 minutes.
If you have a pet Pacific link cod, then you might be able to do that, because they gain and lose on average 20 teeth every day.
Such a hassle.
Whoa!
Yeah, so every day 20 of the teeth fall out and 20 new ones grow in their place.
Amazing.
Nice. They are also probably too big for your fish tank, aren't they? I think they're about 5 feet long.
Oh, they
Depends, obviously, on the size of your fish
They,
tank.
they could fit in my pond
Yeah.
if they kind of bent themselves in half.
Have you seen the really horrible sheep's head fish? If you haven't seen it, Google it, but it is pretty gross. It's
Wow.
basically got like just human teeth. It's like a big gummy smile with. It's very unpleasant.
And it's not nice human teeth, is it? It's sort of like someone who hasn't cleaned their teeth for 20 years.
It's really disconcerting when you see a fish that doesn't have the face of a fish.
Yeah.
If anyone, I don't know if it's still there, I don't know the lifespan, but about 7 years ago, I was in a restaurant in Bow Road, in a Chinese restaurant. They had an aquarium, and there was a fish there with a face of a dog. It just had a dog's head. It was the weirdest thing.
Dogfish.
Is this one of those restaurants where you go in and you choose the fish you want them to cook? Because I reckon if it is, it probably is still there.
It's a defense mechanism.
I'll have the dog face, please.
To be fair, it is possible that maybe a dog was looking through the other side of the tank.
Was it a fellow diner's pet?
Yeah. You can see fish that have human-looking teeth as well.
Yes.
What's it called?
Yeah.
The pacu?
Pacu.
Wait, you mean as well as the one that Anne's mentioned?
Oh, is that the pacu one?
He's a sheep. Mine's a sheep's
It's
head
called
fish.
sheep's head, but that might be the official name.
Right.
Apparently there are more fish than you would think with like human-looking teeth.
Yeah.
But the one that scared me the most, I didn't know ducks could have teeth on their beaks. You see,
they?
yeah, the goosander duck. Not only that, he lives in the UK. They're everywhere. I'm now terrified of this duck.
The goose, that would be a great animated cartoon for Lou Sanders to do. You got the Goose Sanders, which say Shonigan, Josh Widdicombe, and Goose Sanders.
Looking up this lineup really well.
I was thinking, oh, what did you see in the park? Goose and the duck? Oh, really? Two things? No.
Just the one with all the teeth.
The pacu we mentioned a few seconds ago, they supposedly can bite human testicles off.
Lovely.
They're invasive. They were, I think you get them in like Papua New Guinea or somewhere, and they have come into the Northern Hemisphere more recently, and whenever they catch one, it's always in the news. It's like testicle biting fish in the
Right.
Thames or whatever.
Really?
And I think it's not true. They're vegetarian, so they eat nuts. And
Okay.
the story
That
goes,
does make sense.
the story goes that someone with particularly nut-like testicles
Yep.
was standing by the water in Papua New Guinea.
That's some
urinating.
swollen balls that person has got if they've got the consistency of a
hilarious.
nut.
It depends what kind of nut.
Are there any nuts that are as soft as testicles out there?
No, this does sound like one incident, and it's similar to a man going to a hospital saying, I don't know how my penis got inside this vacuum cleaner, but
It's an invasive species of Henry Hoovers who supposedly eat penises. I think it is. There's a little bit of that. I think there was one story of some people in Papua New Guinea, and one person possibly had their genitals bitten by this fish, and it has since kind of.
but
Now-
what was he doing with that fish is
He
my
was
question.
urinating by the side of the lake.
Well, was,
Yeah,
that,
right.
was that there was a story, a scary story about fish that would swim up your urine stream?
Yeah.
Was that real?
No,
I feel like they're not. Can we just establish that there's a big difference? And I feel like tabloids often do this as well in headlines, then you read the text. And James, you may have just done it between bitten and bitten off. And I think it's much less scary to have something bite your arm than to have it bite off your arm, for
Yeah.
instance.
Same with testicles, I would argue as well.
Yeah, probably is the same.
I think what I'm saying is that there was a very small little nibble on this man's genitals, and
And it
has
made the
since-
national news.
It snowballed into
Since.
whenever the pacu comes to town, everyone's like, "That's the ball eating."
The other
fish."
option is that he was bit on the balls by a human and had to quickly come up with an excuse for his wife and went, no, it was the fish that has human teeth. that did it."
It's called the sheep's head.
because someone's human has bitten his balls.
Yep.
He's gone. No, it's a fish. And she's like, well, you can see the teeth marks.
Yeah.
They're human. They're clearly human teeth.
yeah, the pacu. It's the pacu. Yeah.
Not only are you having an affair, you're having an affair with someone who gives very bad blowjobs.
I was reading about a different type of mouths that fish can have.
Oh, yeah.
You can have a superior mouth or an inferior mouth.
Okay, what's your
do you know
criteria?
what that is?
No.
Can you guess what it is?
A superior and an inferior.
One's on top of your head, I suppose. Because it's
On top of your head.
Well, because if it's superior, I feel like it's on the top.
How many fish have you seen where the mouth is above the eyes?
Oh, look, we've said that I bet there are some fish where the mouth is above the eyes.
That was an upside down fish you were looking at.
Turn it around.
It was my dead goldfish.
Is it?
You're more or less there, in fairness. A superior mouth is basically, imagine a smiling fish.
Yeah.
And imagine a frowning fish for an inferior mouth.
Oh, so it's
Like
like whether it turns
curves
up or
up.
down.
Yeah, precisely. And
Right.
if you have a superior mouth and you're a smiling fish, then you usually would feed on the surface. So you might get insects from the
So
surface
that's
of the
like
water.
turning your spoon around to like go up or
Precisely,
go
yeah.
down.
And if you're an inferior mouth, you're probably a bottom feeder. As in you're getting stuff off the floor.
Yeah.
And they have terminal mouth like goldfish, which is just at the front. So it's neither a smile nor a frown. And they're usually omnivores. They'll eat all sorts of stuff.
Oh, that's right.
It's quite interesting that if you look at a fish and you see whether it's smiling or frowning, you can tell how it eats.
So it means you can't tell their mood.
No, you can't. I
Because
think
imagine if you were a really grumpy, pessimistic fish, but you've got this superior mouth, and you're like, oh, everyone thinks I'm so jolly, having the worst day.
Haven't really talked about narwhals before.
Oh yeah,
And they're a
Pretty.
toothed whale. Count as a toothed whale.
That's one big tooth that's
It's
on.
just, yeah.
it's where they think unicorns. The idea for unicorns
Right.
came from. They found these narwhal tusks, and they were like, wow, this must be from a horse.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
But not only is it one big tooth, it's their only tooth.
Yeah.
And it's actually their left tooth.
the left tooth.
It's their left canine. So they all have a right canine that doesn't erupt in their mouth. In fact, occasionally you'll see a narwhal where its right one is erupted and it's got a double double horn thing going on.
That's cool.
That's cool. Is it like mostly the males have really long ones? Or
Yeah,
is
females tend not to have them actually.
that really?
At all.
And do we know what sort of like the evolutionary reason for them retaining
I think if
just
males
one?
have them, it feels like it's sexual selection.
It does, but again, bizarrely, given they're quite prominent, we really don't know. And they've looked at lots of things. They thought maybe they use it as an ice pick, or as a tool for echolocation. And
Or sort of like a cocktail stick for, how you put sausages and pineapples on and cheese
Yeah.
and so on.
But then that would only be for catering, because if it was on your tooth, you couldn't get it in your mouth.
That's true.
Well, no, but you might bring it to the mate that you're trying to...
Oh, yeah, it'd be like, look what I've got for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that's sexy, Dan, if your partner has a really long tooth, they attach some pineapple and cheese on and feed it directly into your mouth? Is that what does it for you?
You know his wife. You know she's got that.
You're not signed up to my OnlyFans. I thought you... Is that the biggest tooth in
question.
nature?
Oh, it is big. How long can they get to? I feel like they can get to a couple of meters, can't they?
I reckon it must be.
It's about half their
Defender.
body length.
Yeah.
Because tusks are not teeth. Tusks are keratin? No.
Keratin?
Keratin.
Keratin.
I'm going to have a word with my drug dealer. It's doing nothing for me.
My hair looks amazing.
Yeah. And I'm being accused of poaching. What's going on, mate?
The other thing could be possibly like other large whales that have got teeth, but I reckon that would be the biggest.
Yeah, it's got to be up there. Yeah. Just on the subject of fish teeth, I came across, actually a while ago, and I've been looking for a chance to mention it, an old Russian folk tale of a beautiful young woman who's married to a really disgusting man that she hates. And
Sounds like my marriage.
Tell me how long that continues to be true in this story. And so to put him off having sex with her, she puts a fish head into her vagina, so that every time he's up for it, he's like, oh, what are all these teeth? I guess it's one of these goldfish with the teeth heads.
That's the pacu.
It's the pacu. It's a pacu head, it specifies. And then she says, what, you idiot? All women have this. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. But that's what everyone's doing. And so he never gets to have sex with her.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's a shame.
It's a really sad story for him.
It is.
And for
rather.
her, who's got a fish. In places where you shouldn't have fish.
She's come a bit worse off, yeah.
If she'd have put a sucker mouth catfish up her fanny, it might have been better, because they have bendy teeth.
Oh, okay.
First fish that we found that have got bendy teeth.
Really?
Yeah, because they scrape stuff off rocks, and if they had hard non-bendy teeth, then they might fall off or they might break or whatever. And they reckon that probably more fish have them as well, but we've never found them before, so that might be quite nice. Some bendy teeth.
Yeah. Oh, she'd be so annoyed if she got that one fish. She's like, oh, I'm into this.
That's vagina dentata is common in folklore, isn't it? And is it who's the god in Moana? Is
It's
it Maui?
Maui.
Does
Yeah.
he get eaten by some vagina?
Yeah,
or
I
something?
think he
Yeah.
does.
He
I think
does. We
that's
mentioned that
not
a while ago.
featuring the live-action Moana remake that Disney are currently working on.
Okay, it is time for fact number 3, and that is my fact. My fact this week is that a book club in America has finally finished reading Finnegan's Wake after 28 years of monthly meetups.
28 years.
28 years.
It's impressive.
It's incredible. They started in 1995. There was between 10 and 30 people who would show up to these monthly book clubs. And Finnegan's Wake is a very complicated, unreadable book. They decided, rather than getting through the whole thing and doing it in one book club, they would take it 2 pages at a time. That proved to be, I think, a bit too much. So they then brought it down to 1 page per book club. And they've been doing this. They did it, through the pandemic. They've been doing it over Zoom. They keep meeting up. And they finally just got to the end. But it's being reported as the end. But as the man who runs the book club, a guy called Jerry, pointed out, it ends on a sentence that is a continuous loop sentence, which means you come right back to the beginning of the book. So they're just starting from page 1 again now.
What a horrible realisation that must have been in the last session.
The last day, pop the champagne.
Thank God I never have to see these awful people again.
That's amazing.
But it's amazing. Like, the people who've been in and out of this group, one guy dropped out of the group for 20 years and came back. back. You know, they
He
were
must have been
still
quite
reading.
lost, but then I suppose everyone is. So.
I think they got
Yeah.
through 15 chapters in that time. Yeah, that's the whole
That's
point of it, isn't
amazing.
it? It's a completely impenetrable book. Even people that you would consider to be those who love literature and would like be snooty and say, no, it's actually a masterpiece, all just say it's just lots of words. No one can agree like who the main characters are,
It's
what the plot
amazing.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
have you dipped into it?
No, Finnegan's Wake, no, of all Joyce's stuff. I don't know if Anna has. But
No.
yeah, I think it's amazing that even after all this time, they've read it for 28 years, they won't be able to say what happened because no one knows what happened.
No one knows.
It's just, that's so amazing, isn't
It's
it?
mad.
It's
And-
almost like an endurance sport rather than a hobby now, isn't it? Like 28 years.
But this is the
Yeah.
thing. They're not like alone in being a book club that has done this. They just happen to have possibly gone the longest. There's a guy called Sam Sloat who's a historian. He's an expert at Trinity College Dublin on Joyce. That's what he looks into. And he was reading the book for 15 years. There was other groups that they all go into like just over 10 years, but this is the longest one so far.
Think of all the books that you've missed out on in that time that actually make sense.
Yeah, that's true. You can't read all the books in your lifetime.
Yeah.
You might as well stick with ones. The Hungry Caterpillar, absolute banger.
Yeah,
Get
absolutely
through that
rocking.
many times in one meeting.
But I think this is what Joyce wanted. I think he wanted people to dedicate their lives to reading just him, to
That's
analysing
quite
him.
a big move, isn't it? Like, no, you'll be my book, and only my book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's a statement about what you think of yourself.
Well, he's kind of done it with certain people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, your fact, sorry, I meant to say, Dan, is wrong.
Yeah, I noticed that spelling mistake.
A bit of a spelling mistake, yeah.
Oh.
Well, technically...
I see.
Yeah, a bit of a punctuation error, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's okay. I put an apostrophe S. Yes.
An apostrophe. I'd actually never noticed this until I went to the Wikipedia page. There's no apostrophe in it. So it's not the wake of Finnegan. It's Finnegan's, plural, wake. It's like Finnegan's, comma, wake, exclamation mark. And there's a character called Finnegan in it, and I believe he's being resurrected. So it's like he's waking up.
So shouldn't he be the main character? I haven't read it either, but I would assume if it's called Finnegan's Wake and you've got a Finnegan.
Well, there are quite a few
You'd think.
Finnegans
Are there?
as well.
Are there?
Oh, really? I thought the Finnegans was just referring to, was like pluralized to be confusing and refer to like Irish people generally. But are there multiple Finnegans
Well,
in the
there are
book?
multiple Finnegans. I think the collective Irish group being called Finnegans is the most common explanation for the lack of apostrophe.
Right.
Some people think it's so that the word wake can mean the awakening and also the wake as in after someone dies, so it gives you a nice little bit of uncertainness there. Some people think it was a fuck up by Samuel Beckett who wrote
Wait, sorry? Samuel Beckett
so
was his proofreader?
no, well, Joyce kind of what do you call it when someone speaks it to you?
Dictated.
Yeah, Beckett dictated it.
Really?
Yeah, or
Right.
certainly some of it.
Are you mixing transcribing and dictating?
Oh, perhaps.
What's the difference? You would
Then
dictate.
you dictate to someone and then they transcribe what you're saying.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Oh, I
yes.
see, yeah.
So
Okay.
I think Joyce's
Joyce was dictating
Beckett
and
was
Beckett was
transcribing.
transcribing. Excellent point.
just saving
Maybe-
you 5 minutes in the edit.
Maybe they weren't though. Maybe it was always the other way around and Beckett wrote it.
I'm like, don't put my name on that. I don't want to be cursed.
Famous story where Beckett is dictating and there's a knock on the door and James Joyce says, "Come in," and Beckett just writes "come in" the middle of the
yes.
story.
Oh, really?
So that was from a biography of Joyce, where he interviewed Beckett, and Beckett said this happened. But if you look in the text and just Control F, you don't have to read the whole thing. But if you look in the text and look for the phrase "come in," there is no place where it's just like an interjection where it doesn't belong. So either Beckett made it up, or maybe it actually happened, and then later on he thought, you know what, that was stupid, I'm going to take that out.
Right.
We're not sure what happened.
Or an editor was like,
I don't think there was much of an editor, because there was loads of typos in all of Joyce's work, wasn't there?
And that's something that's really interesting, because there's been I was reading an article where they're saying that basically the way you can read Joyce now, people have been trying to make sense of this book so much that they've employed different ways of cleaning it up in order to make sense of it. So there's a version out there where people have taken all the typos out, so it kind of reads a bit more smoother and you're not going, what the hell is this word?
Yeah.
There's a digital version now where basically everything is hyperlinked. Therefore, you can get an understanding of everything, and you find yourself using it as a repository of all knowledge. It's basically a weird encyclopedia where you just go, oh, cool, I'm now learning about this random thing by clicking on it. So they keep trying to turn it into something useful.
But it's not.
But it's not. Yeah. Ultimately, it's just not in its own thing. And the words that he made up in it, there's a 100-letter long word on the first page, which is the sound of a thunderclap that was heard at the fall of the Garden of Eden.
Are you going to give us the word?
Yeah, I want to hear the words.
Yeah, it's Baba Baba Dalagaragataka Miminana Rocken Kon Bon Brontoni Ron Tuan Thutton Tong Rova Hunau Sukon Tu Hurenden Tantorok no. Yeah, it's close, but not quite.
That was pretty good. I think.
I mean,
I felt like there was a storm outside.
I would argue that Boom does the same job.
That would have been your first thing as an editor. Right, boom, opening words.
Life would be more difficult for the Venga Boys if no one had invented the word boom and they had to do this 4 times. But that's
Much less catchy.
it was reused by Sylvia Plath in The Bell Jar, that word.
That word, right.
Yeah.
Can I see it written down?
Yeah, it's there.
Are you thinking about using that in your next children's book, Anne? Because
It's in the title.
It depends if you're on a word count for being paid number of words or whether you're paid number of letters.
Yeah.
I think that's...
Useful words as well that he made up, which we've already mentioned before, but quark is from Finnegan's Wake.
Yes.
The scientific word. It's from, there's a line in it that goes 3 quarks from Muster Mark, and then quarks can cluster together in 3s to form other, so that's where
I think
that
Murray
was inspired
Gell-Mann
by.
wanted to call them quarks.
Yeah.
And he always had this idea of they're called quarks, and then he saw the word quark in Finnegan's Wake, where it clearly rhymes with Mark, but even though he spelt it in the same way that Joyce did, he always pronounced it quark.
Do you think he really tediously corrected people whenever they referred to it?
It's really interesting because I always call them quarks, having studied physics, and I think 75% of physicists say quark rather than quark.
I can't believe as many as 25% are doing the pretentious, this is what he wanted, quark pronunciation. Come on, physicists.
This is very like the laser loser. So laser is an acronym. Forgotten what they
Light
is.
amplified.
Yeah, and then someone's like, actually the light's oscillating, so they should be called losers. But that didn't catch on.
I never heard that.
Nice. Oh, that's great.
Joyce was particularly upset about World War II, wasn't he? I know none of us liked it, but it was a real bugbear for him because it interrupted the publication of his book, or he was worried it would get in the way. So, as discussed, he spent 17 years writing it, which is not that long when you consider how long it takes to read. But he was realising he was sort of getting close to the end in about 1936, and he was getting really stressed out about global conditions. At one point, he complained to a friend, look, the fact that the world is in such a bad state at the moment is really stressful for me because I find it so hard to write, being so anxious about it. And then when he handed in the manuscript in 1939, he said, please hurry publishing it because war's going to break out and then no one will read my book anymore.
That is amazing.
That's not why.
The thing is, if you're going to spend, how long, 17, 18 years writing it, the chance of it would have to be in the high-end period of peace, wouldn't it? Like, there's no other time when you're not going to run into some war or other.
You're right.
So I was looking at what the longest book to read, like by pages rather than complexity.
Oh, yeah.
So the longest novel in the Penguin Classics and Modern Classics is In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust.
Yeah.
It is 6 volumes, 3,616 pages.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in the time it would take you to read it, you could fly from London to Auckland and back again, and then to Barbados. But only if you have to not take any breaks. You have to read one page a minute for that entire time.
1 page a minute.
Yeah, I bought a copy of that thinking I would read it, and it was absolutely massive. And I started, and then I realised that I only had the first volume. Oh, no. I was like, if this is the first volume, there is no way in the world I'm going to read this.
Years ago, I thought I'd read Oliver Twist, and I said to someone, I've just finished Oliver Twist. And they said, oh, did you like the bit about Dodger's trial? And I said, what trial? And I'd had an abridged version and hadn't realised. Oh, really? I missed out loads.
You read the transcript of the musical theatre version?
Yeah.
Oliver exclamation mark.
Yeah. I love the songs. Yeah. You read as part of Fish research, or you started reading, curious if you finished, Les Mis.
God, I started reading so many things as a part of this research. In fact, I started reading The Woman in White a few weeks ago and still haven't got to the end of that. But yeah, Les Mis, I got most of the way through it, but I didn't finish it. No.
Well, I read Les Mis is 365 chapters, so you can read one a day, which is quite neat. But not in a leap year, or you can have a day off.
Interesting.
James, have you ever thought about reading fiction for pleasure rather than for the podcast? I think you might get to the end of more books.
I really struggle. I gotta say, I really struggle to read fiction for pleasure these days.
Really?
Yeah, because I read so much non-fiction for my job. I need like a year off.
What you need is a book club, because I started doing a book club, and it does force you to read. Yeah, and it forces you to read, things that you might not have, new books that have come out that people have been
Is
suggesting.
that the idea of fiction, that you're forced to read stuff and that's why you do it?
It carves out the time for you to do it, which is interesting.
Accountability.
Yeah.
Aren't you in the same book club as Andy, though? I think I've heard about some of the books.
Is it just Andy's book every week?
It is. Yeah. It does feel like a post-apocalyptic world that I'm living in every time we chat about it.
What was your best book you discovered through a book club?
Sylvie Plath's The Bell Jar, which I love her poetry, and I've never read the book itself.
I've actually never read.
Did you remember this? Because I haven't read that book, and so I was going off Wikipedia that this word was in it. But I think it is true, right?
Weirdly, I don't remember the word, but you don't remember every detail.
Well,
right?
you might remember 100-letter word.
I just assumed it was a typo.
Well, no, but also when you're on a deadline for book club, it's like, fantastic, what a great word to zoom me forward. It's like the fast lane. It's like a travelator.
They are good. Aren't you in a book club?
No, I'm not. But I think what I would like to be in one for is that discovering books that you might not know about. So I've got some friends who are just so good at book recommendations and really good at like personalizing it to what you like to read. So I read an article years ago saying that actually there's an argument that you shouldn't read books that win prizes, and the argument being that if you say you're not into Russian high society and agriculture, why would you suddenly be so just because it won a prize? So actually it can put you off books. Whereas actually if you go in
Are you
and say...
describing War and Peace there? Oh, sorry, Anna Karenina, sorry.
But what if you aren't into agriculture, aren't into Russian high society, but are into people being hit by trains? What do you...
Then I reckon there's somewhere a bookshop where that's the category.
Hear Andy's podcast at QI.com email pinging. Furious. How dare you spoil the ending?
Well, that's good that we're bucking a trend a bit, you being in a book club, Dan, and I in fact am in a book club, and Anne not, because it's extraordinary. I know we know that it's mostly women, but it's 88% of book clubs, in America at least, are all women. And women generally read quite a lot more fiction than men. And book clubs are so popular these days as well. I think since Oprah Winfrey's book club, they've shot up. I think there was a survey of women who read at least one book a month that found over half of them were in book clubs, which makes sense because when you're reading that often,
here's a really interesting thing. I went to a publishing party not too long ago, and there was an author there who I'd met whose book came out at the same time as mine. She had an American release. It was a fiction novel called Wayward. Brilliant. And she was a New York Times bestseller. And she's an Australian who moved over here. It's her first debut book. I said, how? You weren't even in America. How did that happen? Book clubs. She said publishers desperately try and put their books in positions to get them into book clubs, because if you do, you're a New York Times bestseller.
You sell like 30 a time rather than...
They're just massive.
How do you go around like asking people, are you in a book club?
So you give away a lot of free books and stuff online as ebooks, and then it gets a reputation, and then book clubs pick it up. And Reese Witherspoon is the other massive book club in America.
Oh, so do you mean big famous book clubs?
Yeah.
Sorry, you don't mean just like my book club.
No,
there are people knocking on my door.
Probably them as well. Like just
probably them as well, yeah.
Just books that are like heavily marketed or promoted. Do you know where the biggest book club in the world is?
The biggest in the world.
Okay.
India or China, right?
Contender.
I'm going to say Iceland, because they're famously, they all write books and read novels. And
So I feel like I should have checked all the book club counts, but I'm going with volume. I'm going with the digital world. Book Talk. So this is the book club version of TikTok.
Oh, okay.
So they believe that Book Talk has sold 20 million books in 2021. Like, it's huge. There's this huge trend on books
Hoover,
now.
Right?
And they'll say, like, TikTok made me buy it. And it's like these books that just really drive through TikTok. So much so that they've launched the TikTok Book Awards this year. And what I love about this is, because TikTok, I guess, is so many people, they're not just books that came out this year that were popular in one shop by one sort of person. So they gave an award to Jane Austen. She got revival.
No
It's like really new stuff, really old stuff.
Can I ask,
mix.
for like older listeners, not myself, obviously, but for other people who might not really know what TikTok is, can you explain how that works? It's not just one book club where everyone reads the same thing.
No, so TikTok is video sharing, and I'm guessing everybody who uses the hashtag BookTok and can see what they're talking about. So things sort of trend and build.
Got it. Yeah.
And you sort of find, and I guess what's nice about it is if you've read a book that you love it and no one else has, you can find someone who's made a video and see what they say about it. Whereas if I've read one book and no one else I know has read it, and to be fair, sometimes I finish a book and I'll go onto Goodreads just to see what people have said and see if I agree with them.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Especially when it's a good like twisty end and I'm like, did I understand that properly? What actually happened? And I'll go and check.
I have a mental reasoning question for you.
Brilliant. Love these.
Going back to Oprah's book club.
Yeah.
So it was founded in 1996, and the idea was that it would be quite highbrow literary options that she chose. So she's had great books in there like William Faulkner, Toni Morrison, Cormac McCarthy. So really good books over the years, and every time she makes a choice, it pretty much becomes a bestseller. It's like rockets to the top of the charts.
Yep.
It doesn't exist anymore. I think it stopped in about 2010 or something. Okay. But whenever she chose a book sales actually after that decreased. Why?
Do you mean book sales more generally?
General book sales decreased.
Okay, this is why. Everyone wanted to buy this one particular book. It went out of print really quickly, and no one bought anything else because they were waiting for that one to come back into print.
Interesting. Not correct. Good guess, though.
Paper shortage. It used up so many trees that...
Half of the Amazon, Oprah's responsible for destroying, actually.
Yeah.
No, it's specifically about the fact that she chose quite highbrow options, but appealed to an audience that wouldn't necessarily be reading things like that all the time.
Okay, so
they spent more time reading?
She got it.
So rather than buying 2 books, you buy one and read it for 2 weeks. So.
Exactly. These people who are buying, 3 books a week and pacing through them, they're suddenly reading, The Sound and the Fury and spending a few weeks on it.
So really everyone should be buying much shorter books and getting through more of them. How long's your book, then?
345 pages, but it's a very big font. So
mine's a children's book, so it's a bit shorter.
Okay, it is time for our final fact of the show, and that is James.
Okay, my fact this week is that the liquid in a can of beans is more likely to make you fart than the beans themselves.
Okay, good to know.
Incredible.
Useful knowledge.
Yeah.
Is it?
So...
Are you going to start rinsing all the liquid off?
No, I'm going to start chugging bean juice because I just want to be more farty. So this comes from an article on the website Serious Eats, and they partnered with Harvard's Science of Cooking program and looked at the fartiness of various beans and stuff like that, and to see if there were any ways to decrease the effect. And they looked at various old wives' tales of how you do this, like you soak your beans for ages. This would not be a can of beans, for instance. You might soak your beans for ages and then cook them in a certain way and see if that makes
I like the idea of someone soaking their Heinz baked beans. Everyone always soaks beans, so yeah, left them overnight.
It might be cooking them with bay leaves or something like this. And nothing really made any difference. But they looked at tinned beans, and they did find actually that rinsed beans from a tin are 20% less farty than unrinsed, and that the liquid you throw away is 30% fartier than the beans are themselves.
Wow.
And why?
So it seems like it kind of seeps into the juice,
right.
And also the beans, they kind of disintegrate the longer they're in there, and the more farty ones are the ones that disintegrate. The hard ones that you just kind of go straight through you, they don't disintegrate.
Right.
And so it's the fartiness seems to just get into the juice somehow.
That's so interesting.
I think some things probably work, right? Like there are some things that could counteract the fartiness. There's kombu, the Japanese seaweed that you get in like kombu dashi. It's an ingredient of that, and that has these enzymes that break down the sugars in beans when you eat them. So the reason that beans make you fart is because you can't digest the stuff in them, but the bacteria in your stomach can, right? And then the bacteria, as it digests it, releases these gases. And I believe that kombu manages to break down those sugars, so the bacteria doesn't have as much to eat and fart out.
Correct.
And so if you add this seaweed to everything, that might work.
Might do.
Give it a go.
I actually, you mentioned my book before. I wrote about a guy who tried to stop farts from being produced off the back of beans.
Yeah,
right?
he did.
Yeah, wonderfully, a man called Colin Leakey. And Colin Leakey is the son of Mary and Louis Leakey, who were the great anthropologists who discovered all these hominid skeletons throughout history. So he had seen a report of NASA trying to make beans that could be sent into space and not produce flatulence, so lose the fart stuff from beans. And he thought, yes, that would be amazing to do, because if you could invent a bean that gave you less farts, you could have that in developing countries where they sometimes sometimes, Crohn's disease, for example, beans are meant to be avoided. So there's a lot of health implications if you have a lot of wind in you. So he thought, if I could invent a bean, that could be like a meat replacement, and then we could have safe eating that's going on for all these poorer countries.
Okay.
So he spent a lifetime doing that, and he did invent 2 beans, which are on sale and have been sent over, which are meat replacements and less flatulent. So he was a scientist who did great things. But my favorite thing is he patented an invention called the flatometer, which was a device that slots into your rectum, and there's a tube coming out that connects to a balloon on the other end, and you tuck the balloon into your shirt pocket, and you just collect these. These are his real invention.
Gets bigger.
Yeah, kind of like the viper fish.
At the end of the day, you're like, oh.
Worst children's party ever.
The balloon dog you get given.
So I was reading that they have measured how much volume a fart has, and they did it by feeding everyone beans, then using a rectal catheter to catch the fart. Would you like to guess the mils? How many mils your average fart?
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's a gas, so it spreads out quite a lot. So you would think it would be quite a high mils.
Yeah, interesting.
572.
Wow.
What? I was going to say more like 20.
You're kind of in the middle, 90. So we fit in your airport hand
Not
luggage.
really in the middle.
I suppose it doesn't count as a liquid, does it? Unless you've done a little bit of follow through. Well, another useful thing scientists have invented, speaking of following through, a useful thing scientists have invented is a machine that listens to your bottom and distinguishes a fart from a shart. And
I would argue you would know without a machine whether that's happened.
You do usually know, don't you? But often
But do they tell you before or after?
it actually tells you when it's happened.
Wait, is it more for when someone's done it, but you're with them and you say, was that a fart or a shart? And they say, no, it's just a fart. And then you go, let me get my machine out.
Get to the bathroom, you filth pig. It's meant to also detect more than that as well. So the idea is that you have this device. It's called the, and listen carefully, the Synthetic Human Acoustic Reproduction Testing. The shot. Yeah, and basically it's to give early warning of like colorectal cancers, things like that, bowel cancers, because it's thought that you might have changes in your flatulent sounds or in your poo sounds, and if it listens, it might then say, oh, your poos sound a bit different these days, or your farts sound a bit weird. Have you thought about getting checked out? And so researchers listened to many hundreds of hours of audio of various pooing and farting noises and then tagged them correctly to train the machine.
Wow.
And it can now identify whether something's urination, flatulence, solid defecation, or diarrhea 98% of the time. So it's not at the super advanced level yet, I suppose. It's still at the stage of distinguishing a wee from a poo. But
yeah, it's not that advanced. If you play them George Osborne's new podcast, it does say it's diarrhea. I was just thinking who I could slam of the podcast community.
You thought
Wouldn't attack us all, yeah.
good luck when he's on next week.
How much do you think the cheapest can of beans you could buy in the UK was in 1996?
Oh, 1996.
Yeah.
Like
4p?
Yeah,
9p?
a couple of p.
Couple of p? Yeah. The answer is negative 2p.
They paid you to take them. Why?
I'll have 2 million.
Oh, did you get like money back for returning the tin or something?
No,
So
this was just a crazy moment in retail where it was called the Bean Wars, and basically they were just competing to make the price lower to win the competition. That it got to a point where this one place, which was
supermarkets,
called,
right?
supermarkets, and this place called Sanders Supermarket basically had a deal whereby
surprisingly enough, doesn't exist anymore. As well as I know.
sold too many beans and went bust.
But it went so low that they went into the negative. So if the beans were part of a shopping pile that you had, they took the 2p off. So off your final bill. If you were just buying the can of beans, they gave you 2p. But you could only do it for one tin. That was their thing. But there was a point where you were paid to leave a supermarket with a can of beans.
This is like when you want to buy when you want a sandwich and it's better to get the meal deal than so you end up having to like buy a drink as well, and then your sandwich is
Yeah.
cheaper.
It is, but it's very rare that you can just take the drink from the meal deal and they'll pay you for it. The difference that you would have saved.
It's incredible.
That is unbelievable.
Tesco was selling them at 7p.
Do you think people went around lots of different supermarkets collecting
but-
as many 2p's
Yeah.
as they
But
could?
if it's 2p and one tin, it's quite limited. So they probably lose less money than they would from like halving the price of like ketchup or toilet roll.
Totally.
The
yeah.
price of petrol or bus fare to get to the shop is going to be more than 2p, so it's false economy to go around the country to all of these shops.
Making 2p. But it would feel nice to get your 2p off and get your free beans.
It would. God, I'm the kind of person who would just always do that for no particular reason. Don't even need that many beans.
Just going in with different hats on to get more beans. Yes. I'm back again.
Heinz, I was on the Heinz factory website because they make beans.
Yeah.
And do you know the average number of beans in a Heinz tin?
Oh, well, what size?
The normal size.
There are 3 sizes.
Okay, your class. Wow, 3.
Oh, yeah, you've got those mini ones.
Got the mini one, the full one, which is like 200, 400, and then you got the snack pot.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah, sorry. I mean the normal ones.
Showing you too much what I eat for lunch.
And Anne mixes it up every day with a different one.
Yeah, I'm going to mix it up and have 2 small pots instead of 1 big pot. 572.
That's a good guess.
Which size tin did we establish?
It's the 400.
The one everyone knows.
The mainstream one.
Yeah.
Not your edgy left field, trendy one.
It's so hipster these days, Anne.
Okay, in a standard size of beans.
I can't believe you now don't know the answer, given your knowledge.
You bought so much time.
James, how many did you say?
572.
Okay, I'm going to go... I feel so invested in this now. I'm going to go 424.
Nice.
Oh, okay, then 365.
And you have one, so
thank
it's
goodness.
working such a sword.
I like Dan's idea of 365. It's like every day I'll have 1 bean and read 1 chapter of Les Miserables.
It's 465 on average. But the reason I say that is because in 2019, councillor Steve Smith, in a break from cheating at cricket, got back... I do think it's a different guy, probably. He got back from a residents' meeting late at night, thought I'll crack into a can of Heinz baked beans, and it was full of sauce and contained 1 bean.
I remember that. How crazy that I remember that.
Do you remember the story?
Yeah, I remember that story coming out.
Really?
Yeah.
Imagine how farty he would have been the next day.
Oh my god.
Hungry and 40. It's the worst combo.
I was very randomly. I was in an office the other day, and in through the door came Greg Wallace, who's in MasterChef.
Oh, yeah.
That guy. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah, he was there was no connection between us two being there. He came and walked up to me and said, "Want to hear a bean fact?" And
What?
I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I went, oh, he must listen to fish. And he went, so at the bean factories, they have a laser which tests out good beans.
Yeah.
And if they don't like it, they flick the bean off. And he was like, so they have a bean flicker at the thing. And I was like, oh, great, that's so cool. We could use that on fish or QI. And he went, are you connected to that? So,
I would have assumed this guy's really into food facts, and he just tells anyone.
he literally opened a door, looked me in the face, walked up to me and said, do you want to hear a bean fact? Of course I'm going to assume he
yes.
knows.
I genuinely would never have assumed that.
Do people just
Not
come
at
up to
all.
you randomly?
If it's Greg Wallace, I would have thought he knows he's famous. He's like, I can get away with doing this to a randomer.
I can't believe I'm coming across as the weird one in this story.
You come across as very self-involved. Oh, it's all about my podcast. Greg Wallace is a bean guy.
That's
Talks about
so
beans.
weird. It does sound like a dream.
That is
Yes.
bizarre that
It
he
happened.
does that, though.
It happened.
Would you like to hear a horrifying fart fact? Now we're approaching the winter
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
So on a cold day, if you breathe out, you can see your breath.
Yeah.
Well, if you fart loudly enough, you can see your fart on a cold
kidding,
day,
really?
but not if you're wearing trousers.
Yes, okay.
So it's only a problem for like Winnie the Pooh.
That
Yeah.
is winning the
And I think I've read that
Yeah.
story.
Winnie the Pooh on a windy day. That's what that was about, isn't it?
Yet another reason not to go out in public naked, hey?
I never realised that.
There must be footage on YouTube of people doing that, right?
I haven't searched it, but feel free to.
I will. I will.
I rather think it might be on more specialist channels than YouTube.
Back to Dan's OnlyFans.
Yeah, that's a new
Wiki
whole thread for
farts.
me. Yeah. Wiki farts. Okay, that's it. That is all of our facts. We have now reached the bye Anne period of the podcast today. Thanks for joining us, Anne. We'll see you again soon. If you'd like to get in contact with any of us about the things that we've said over the course of this podcast, you can find us on our social media accounts. I'm on Instagram at Schreiberland. James?
Still on Twitter at James Harkin.
Anne?
My Instagram is @AnneMillerBooks.
And if you want to get us as a group, Anna, where do they go?
You can email podcast@qi.com.
And you can also go to our website, nosuchthingasafish.com. All of our previous episodes are up there. Do check them out. There's also bits of merch. You can find Club Fish, all sorts of fun to be had there. Or just come back here next week. We'll be back with another episode, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.